Greetings, all the panel members. My name is Amar Singh Solanki. I take this opportunity to present our paper. The title of the paper is Application and Evaluation of Imageability on Indian Planned City, Chandigarh, Sector 45. So before taking up this topic, this is a topic which is very near to my heart because I have migrated to Chandigarh in the year 2012, and since then I have been observing, analyzing all the sectors of the Chandigarh. So initially, when I came to Chandigarh, the major problem, the major issue which I faced is with respect to the monotonous design of Chandigarh. So there is a lot of monotony in terms of the streets, the buildings, the nodes, the landmarks. So all look similar to a layman. Maybe if someone comes for the first time to Chandigarh, they won't be able to identify any one particular landmark so that they can connect to the city. So I was lost in the city initially. So, but later on, when I figured out, I came to know the contrasting difference between the new city which is being planned and the old villages, the old urban villages which are inherited by Chandigarh. So one of the very good example is Sector 45 of Chandigarh, which has a very old village, more than 350 years old village known as Burail. Now, this image is a gist of complete research paper. As you can see in the top two images, you will see a residential facade where in the complete regulations, the norms and the building bylaws regulations is being reflected in terms of the elements of the building facade. They are, they are very monotonous with respect to the types of beams and the texture of the material. Similarly, the facade on the right is commercial facade, though the hoardings and stuff which are against the bylaws now, but as you can see overall on a macro level, the facade is very regularized. When we compare the existing buildings with respect to the buildings which we have in Burail village, you can see the bottom two images. It is totally in contrast in terms of the planning, in terms of the land use, in terms of the aesthetics. So the motive of this paper is to identify whether the legibility and imageability elements really stand with respect to the village and city. The first motive is to apply these elements on Sector 45, Chandigarh as a whole, and on the urban village. The second part of the research is identifying other aspects which are important to create mental image on a user. So we have taken up Chandigarh, and as we all know, Chandigarh is a planned city, and it has a very distinctive and very important history behind it, how they have created the landmark city which was required as a capital city to Punjab and Haryana. So this image speaks about the evolution of history. Sector 45 is being developed in the second phase of Chandigarh planning. In the first phase of Chandigarh planning, the sector 1 to 30 were developed. In the second phase of planning, the rest of the sectors were developed. So this is the map. As you can see, the rhombus part in the plan is the Burail village. The moment you have a glance on this image, you can see the density of this village in contrast with the surrounding urban sectors of 45. Apart from Burail, there are many other villages. There were around 60 villages which were rehabilitated. Some of them were shifted to some other cities, and most of the villages has been inherited. And Burail is one of the major village which has some significance historically also. So that is the reason we have chosen Burail, which has a historical essence with respect to the Sikhism, and it has a very landmark structure, Burail Fort. Now the Burail Fort is being demolished, and we have a very known Gurudwara in place of this fort. When we compare the Chandigarh morphology, when we apply the Kevin Lynch parameters, which are known as paths, edges, district, nodes, and landmarks. So what we have done in this research paper, we have tried to apply these elements on the basic sectors of Chandigarh, and then we have compared these elements with respect to the Burail village. And the hypothesis which we had in our mind is that the monotonous things are difficult to create a mental map. Whereas if we have more contrasting planning, if we have some variations and contrasting in streets and paths and nodes, they will create an impact on mental mapping of a user. So we started with identifying and applying these elements on Chandigarh sectors. So as you can see, this Chandigarh is a planned city which developed on a concept of a human body. As per the local rules here, he divided the whole city in parts of the human body known as head, heart, lungs, intellect, and viscera. So we have a very fixed entity of road networking system known as 7Vs. And if you analyze, if you use them, they are very efficient in terms of vehicular movement and traffic pedestrian movement. So it is one of the excellent city wherein you can see the segregations of vehicles, two-wheelers, four-wheelers, and they have a segregated paths for cycle track also. So as I mentioned, we have the concept of 7Vs. As you can see, the roads are divided. There is a hierarchy with respect to the traffic movement, with respect to the width, size of the roads. And these 7Vs are running very successfully. When we talk about district, we have various landmarks within the city. And the city landmarks, only these landmarks building are designed in a contrasting manner. The rest of the buildings have very monotonous patterns of design. When we talk about edges, there are boundaries between two phases. We have a stream of water body running across. We have these landforms, and apart from this, there are some man-made structures also which acts as edges. Nodes, as you can see, the intersection of the roads, they create a very interesting nodes, though now the Chandigarh administration is coming up with proposals of renovating each nodes and adding some landmarks to each nodes by means of some sculpture or some landscape elements. When we talk about built forms and infrastructure, you can see there is a different language for institutional buildings, commercial buildings, and there are some government buildings which has got freedom to use different kind of forms. And so I can say that these forms create a good impact on mental image, the mental map. Whereas when we see other buildings, they are difficult to recognize because they are monotonous in design. And as we all know, Chandigarh is there is a height restriction, so we cannot go for high-rise buildings. And so all the buildings are limited to G+4. And this is about the village, Burel village, which I was mentioning earlier. When we compared all the Kevin Lynch elements with respect to Burel, we have found huge contrast in terms of pathways, in terms of landmarks, nodes, edges, and district. As you can see the paths, it has, though it is a gridiron pattern, the moment you go inside the village street, you will see everything organic. So it is totally in contrast with a rigid grid form. And the village streets, as you can see, they are very narrow and they have a very distinctive identity of these streets. There are few landmarks within the sector, as every sector is being designed as a concept of neighborhood planning. So we do have school and other amenities which are again in contrast with respect to the Chandigarh landmark buildings. The nodes are quite congested. There is a sense of congestion, and traffic congestion is usually seen because of the influx of the traffic from the village to the surrounding urban cores. We have done a couple of figure ground maps to understand the land use and to understand the density. And there is an analysis which we have done to understand the relationship between open spaces and built mass. We have also identified that the rhombus part, as you can see, most of the edges are commercial based. We have hatched in blue color. These reflects the use of the locations of commercial aspects. So usually this is a commercial hub. And as we can see, the movement of traffic and vehicular movement and pedestrian movement near these commercial base is quite comparatively high. We have done height analysis to understand the variation in the edges of the city, edges of the sector. We have done a detailed analysis of each edge with respect to the Burrell village. As you can see in the key plan, this is an analysis of edge A, where we can see on edge, we have a completely mixed land use. We have all the commercial settlement in the base, and we have residential flats above the commercial settlement, which is again, if we compare with other sectors of Chandigarh, they are in contrast, because usually we will not see this kind of skyline when we compare with the skyline of the Chandigarh city. So these are the couple of, all the edge analysis has been done, the mapping has been done, and the comparative analysis has been done. So we have developed a couple of road sections. As you can see, the wider road section, section A, section B, section C, belongs to the sector 45 urban settlement road sections, and the section D, which you see here, is the road of the Burrell village. So comparatively, you can see the narrowness and the width of the road is only 4.5 meter, and even two-wheelers are using this street along with the pedestrian users. We have done photo survey of the issues to identify the issues pertaining to these paths and nodes and other elements, so that we can give remedy and solutions for these issues with respect to imageability of the city. So after that, we have done activity mapping to identify the zones, to identify the configuration of nodes, how the nodes are functioning and what kind of issues people are facing at the nodes. Activity mapping of pedestrian, commercial, and others have been done, as you can see, to understand the variation between the planning and how the edges are used, how the pathways being encroached by commercial entity has been analyzed in this slide. Vehicular congestions at different nodes, why the congestion is being occurring, and how we can resolve the issues, and how these are impacting on the mental mapping of a user. Activity mapping is being done with respect to pedestrian, commercial, and other movements. So these slides talks about activity mapping, and now as you can see, these are few images of the Burrell village, the interiors of the village, wherein you will see the buildings which are, you have multi-storied buildings and no regulations, no bylaws has been followed here. You have different land use, everything is mixed up. So you will see a building having a religious building next to a commercial building, a school next to a commercial building. The skyline is not limited, the hierarchy, the road hierarchy is not being followed. Couple of more images which shows how the streets, how the pathways being used. Then we have done a photo survey of the issues. We try to suggest some visual solutions. Issues with respect to encroachment, waste management, issues with respect to not following the building bylaws, which are very stringent in Chandigarh. So these are the few issues which we have identified. The issues are so sensitive. Why we have done these analysis, so that we can understand how these activity will impact on human mind, how it will help them to understand and to visualize the city. And in the end, we conclude that it is not only the Kevin Lynch elements which imparts a mental image on a user, but apart from these, we have certain quantitative and qualitative aspects which creates huge impact on mental mapping of a city. So rest of the things have been mentioned in the research paper. Thank you so much. Thank you.